Hey guys. Welcome to Calm History. My name is Stefan. Tonight we drift slowly back through the tangled canals of an empire you probably didn't hear enough about in school, unless you had a really enthusiastic history teacher or a serious interest in floating vegetables. You're not walking through ruins or reading from a dusty textbook. You're in a canoe, brushing past lily pads and watching the sky turn pink over the mirror-still waters of Lake Xochimilco. Hey, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now find a cozy spot. Take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations. That's right. You're headed straight into the heart of the Aztec world, not the battlefields, not the temples, but the gardens. Floating gardens. Chinampas, as they were called. Suspended rafts of life, growing tomatoes, beans, flowers, and gossip by the boatload. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive one season out here. The gardening is backbreaking, the mud is unforgiving, and the local ducks are both territorial and judgmental. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the thick morning mist clinging to the water like silk. The canoe you're lying in rocks gently. A heron lets out a slow croak from a nearby tree stump. Your hands are muddy, and you smell like pondweed and tomatoes, and weirdly, you don't mind. The sun hasn't risen yet. The water reflects the stars, broken only by the gentle slicing of canoes heading toward the chinampas. You sit up and stretch, careful not to tip yourself into the canal, again, and start paddling toward the plot assigned to you this season. It's a good one, long, straight, and recently reinforced with woven mats and branches. The edges are lined with willows, anchoring the whole thing in place like green, leafy bookends. The water around you hums with insects. The air smells of warmth, wet earth, and the faint metallic tang of something just beginning to bloom. This is your floating farm. And today, you'll work it the way your ancestors did, gently, rhythmically, and occasionally while muttering under your breath about frogs. You tie off the canoe, step carefully onto the chinampa, and feel the gentle give of the packed earth beneath your sandals. It's firm, but not solid, alive in a way that dirt on land never quite is. Your tools are simple, a flat wooden spade, a basket made of reed, and your grandmother's planting song echoing softly in the back of your memory. 3 scoops for the moon, 2 for the maize, and whisper to the seed before it sinks. You check your tomato rows first. They're healthy, leaves thick and dark, little yellow blossoms curling open like sleepy eyes. No pests. No flood damage. A few vines have grown into your walkway, but you step around them like you're dodging an old friend who tells long stories. You know each plant. You know the one that leans too far to the left, the one that blooms late but sweetens first, the one that somehow always hides a frog underneath its roots. Historians still argue whether the chinampas were entirely artificial or extensions of natural wetlands. Some say the Aztecs reshaped the land with divine precision. Others believe it was more improvisation than invention. What's clear is this: the result worked. The chinampas transformed shallow lakes into green carpets of abundance. Not just gardens, systems. A blend of engineering and ecology. Mud, reeds, human labor, and something that feels close to magic. Your neighbor floats by in his canoe, waving sleepily. His raft is covered in flowers, marigolds mostly, and the scent trails behind him like incense. He tosses you a smile and a question. Seen the duck again? You nod toward the reeds. He's judging me from the shadows. The duck has opinions. Always has. You pause to sip from your water skin. The liquid tastes faintly of lime and clay. Nearby, a cluster of lily pads quivers as a turtle slips beneath them. Time slows. The wind barely moves. And somewhere far off, a flute starts to play, soft, slow, just a few notes that hang in the air like moths around a lantern. This is life on the chinampa. No rush. Just rhythm. And tomatoes. You're still standing on the chinampa, ankle deep in dew-slick soil, when a low thrum beneath your feet reminds you, this garden is not anchored to the earth. Not really. It floats. Sort of. Okay, maybe floats is a stretch. It rests more like on layers upon layers of woven reeds, mud, aquatic plants, and old wisdom. You kneel down and dig your fingers gently into the soil. Cool. Damp. Resilient. You press a little deeper and feel it spring back, flexible yet firm, like a sponge that knows its job. This is no ordinary dirt. You're standing on a chinampa, an Aztec floating garden that somehow manages to feel like both a raft and a field. It's not drifting out to sea or bobbing up and down like a banana leaf. No, it's been staked in place. Anchored with live trees, willows, usually, planted at each corner and along the edges. Their roots entwine with the canal bed, holding everything still like green stitches through a brown and black quilt. The chinampa you're on might be older than you. Older than your grandparents. Possibly even older than that weird broken canoe stuck in the reeds behind your plot that nobody wants to claim. And it still works. You brush aside a clump of creeping bean vine and spot the bamboo matting underneath, tightly woven, still intact. It's layered with aquatic mud hauled from the canal, decomposing plant matter, and lake sludge rich with nutrients. Over time, this becomes the stuff of dreams, black gold for farmers. The kind of soil tomatoes throw parties in. Historians know this was no accident. The Aztecs engineered these chinampas with a level of planning that rivals suburban plumbing systems. Canals were dug at exact intervals. Rafts built to specific dimensions, usually about 30 meters long and 2 to 3 meters wide. Just enough to work comfortably on foot, and still harvest by canoe. You lean on your spade and look around. The canals between the chinampas crisscross like veins, feeding water to the roots from below. They allow access to every plot. You don't walk from one field to another, you paddle. It's an entire agricultural world that never touches dry land. And the tomatoes love it. Their roots go deep, drinking up nutrients from the cool mud below. Their vines are guided by hand, twisted up along reed poles or let to sprawl, depending on the gardener's mood and the phase of the moon. Tomatoes weren't just a staple here. They were a statement. Bright, plump, red as a ceremonial robe. The kind of tomato that tastes like it wrote poetry when nobody was looking. You pull one from the vine, rub the dust off with your sleeve, and take a bite. Sweet. Earthy. Just a little acidic. The skin gives way like a secret, and the juice drips down your chin. You wipe it off and smile. In this place, you don't farm with machines or complex tools. You farm with mud, memory, and patience. Your neighbor glides past again, this time hauling a canoe stacked with amaranth greens. He pauses and taps his oar on the edge of your raft. Wind's shifting, he says. Time to check the pilings. You nod and walk to the far end of the chinampa, where a willow sapling leans suspiciously. You tug at the mooring post, just a carved stake driven into the lake bed and tied with braided reeds. It wiggles a little. Still secure. But if it weren't, your whole garden could slowly float away over time. It's happened before. There's still a joke in the village about the floating cabbage field of your 8 rabbit. Nobody knows where it ended up. Some say it reached the Gulf. Others say it's still out there, drifting like a leafy ghost ship. You untie a clump of waterweed from the side of your raft. It clings like clingiest cling wrap, but it's great for compost. You toss it into a basket and pat the edge of the raft. It's held up well. Even the corners, reinforced with dried cactus pads, are solid. You wonder briefly who built this raft before you. Whose hands pulled the reeds tight. Whose shoulders hauled the muck. Whose sandals left those faint impressions on the corner you never use. You never met them. But their fingerprints are baked into the soil, invisible but everywhere. Historians still debate whether chinampas were inherited or reassigned with each generation. Some records suggest they passed down through families like heirlooms. Others hint that the temple redistributed them season by season, based on merit, need, or mysterious temple politics. Either way, you're grateful for yours. You sit on the edge, feet dangling just above the water, tomato basket beside you. A dragonfly hovers. The sun has risen now, streaking light across the water like spilled honey. Everything feels held together, not by stone or cement, but by trust. In the willows. In the water. In the mud that floats and feeds and never, ever forgets. And in that strange, squishy certainty beneath your feet, you find balance. You're crouched near the tomato rows now, running your fingers through the top layer of the soil, rich, velvety stuff that smells faintly of sweet rot and good luck. Every gardener on the lake swears their mud is the best. But you know better. This isn't just mud. It's an ancient recipe passed down in smudged chants and whispered tips. The chinampa soil isn't born, it's built. You dig a little deeper, scooping up a handful and watching it crumble just right. It's soft, dark, and teeming with life. Worms wriggle through it like they own the place. Spoiler, they kind of do. This particular patch you're tending has just been fed. Not with fertilizer from a bag, but with a careful blend of dredged lake muck, shredded waterweed, pulped corn stalks, ground obsidian dust, in very superstitious doses, and the occasional fish head. Yes, fish head. Preferably left to soften in the sun for a few days, then mashed into a paste that smells so potent, your neighbor's dog passed out the last time you opened the jar. You smear a little into the furrow between two tomato vines, careful not to overdo it. The last thing you want is another vine explosion. You're still apologizing for last season's tomato that grew the size of a baby's head and rolled into someone's canoe. Your grandmother once said, "The best soil is part water, part memory, and part worm poop." She wasn't wrong. Worms, especially, are treated with a weird kind of reverence out here. They're not just compost workers, they're believed to carry the breath of the earth. Some farmers even leave out offerings, mashed squash, sweetened yam paste, and sometimes, if they're feeling poetic, a single pressed marigold. You peek under one of the flat stones lining the tomato bed and nod approvingly at the sight of a particularly plump earthworm. "Keep it up," you whisper. It wiggles like it's heard you. Historians still argue whether the fertility of chinampa soil came more from the dredging of canal sediment or the deliberate addition of organic waste. What they agree on is the result, yields so high, colonial scribes wrote about them in stunned admiration, usually while trying to steal a tomato or two on their way back to camp. Amaranth grows here too, often nestled between tomato rows. Its feathery stalks catch the breeze like red-tinted smoke, and the seeds are a favorite among priests and birds alike. You've had to build tiny fences around it, made from woven reeds and bad language. Your compost pit sits at the rear of the chinampa, covered with a lid made from cracked canoe wood. You lift it gently and drop in a mixture of wilted greens, fish bones, and whatever is left from yesterday's lunch that didn't get claimed by the duck. It steams faintly. The duck, watching from his usual perch, makes a low sound of either appreciation or suspicion. You add a few tomato vines that didn't make the cut, brittle, yellowing, done. Then stir the pile with your spade. The smell isn't pleasant, exactly. But it's comforting. Familiar. Like the inside of a secret that feeds you. At some point, you remember to sing the compost song. You hum it low, under your breath. Give to the ground what the water forgot. Feed what will feed you, cold or hot. Muck for the moon, peel for the sun. Turn it, until the work is done. Nobody really knows where that song came from. But no one skips it either. Except that one guy 2 plots down whose squash always tastes like disappointment. You sprinkle a final layer of dry lake silt over the pit, and cover it again. Then stand back, stretch your arms, and listen. A breeze rustles the amaranth. The tomatoes creak softly on their vines. Somewhere behind you, a frog chirps once, then again, like punctuation. You glance around. Your hands are covered in dirt. Your knees ache. And your heart feels oddly light. Because out here, every handful of soil carries 1,000 years of practice. 1,000 whispered tweaks. 1,000 failed melons, legendary pumpkins, and mildly aggressive zucchinis. And tomatoes? They're not just plants. They're history you can slice. Hey guys. If it's been a good one, drop number 1 in the comments to spread those good vibes. If things haven't been so great, type number 2, just know you're not alone. I'm right here with you, and we'll keep moving forward together, one step at a time, toward more peace and lighter days ahead. You're back in the canoe now, floating slowly along the narrow waterway between 2 rows of chinampas. The paddle rests across your lap, dripping quietly into the lake, and the breeze carries the mingled scent of water lilies, damp wood, and ripe tomatoes. This is your commute. Not a bad one. Your harvest basket sits in front of you, half filled with today's picks. Tomatoes in every shade from yellow to blushing pink to the deep crimson of a sunset that's had a long day. Each one's a little warm from the sun, a little dusty, and absolutely perfect. You steer with one hand, slow and sure, weaving past reed bundles and ducks that absolutely refuse to yield the right of way. The canals aren't roads exactly, but they have their own logic, their own etiquette. You learn to drift to the left when passing someone older. You nod when crossing near a priest's plot. And you always pause for the frog whisperer. You spot him now, perched on a curved branch over the canal, long hair tied back, eyes half closed like he's waiting for a punchline only frogs understand. He doesn't wave. He just nods. You nod back. Your route takes you through the maze of chinampas, plots of tomatoes, squash, beans, and amaranth bordered by shimmering water and guarded by herons who take their job very seriously. A few gardeners are already out, balancing on their floating paths, gently tending vines, whispering encouragement to reluctant cucumbers. And you? You're about to do your own version of work, canoe gardening. You pull up alongside your second plot, a long, narrow chinampa that's home to your younger tomato plants. These aren't the mature ones with heavy fruit and philosophical vines. These are the energetic ones, still stretching toward the sun, still figuring themselves out. You plant the paddle upright in the mud and stabilize the canoe with one foot. Then, using a small scoop and a gentle touch, you begin the careful business of pruning from the boat. It's not glamorous, but it is graceful. You snip away the suckers, those little shoots that appear in the elbows of tomato branches like they're trying to start side gigs without permission. You hum as you go, letting the rhythm of pruning match the bob of the canoe. Snip. Plop. Snip. Plop. You drop each clipping into the water where it floats lazily behind you like a trail of green breadcrumbs. Some gardeners prune barefoot, standing in the canoe like it's solid ground. Others sit cross-legged and hope for the best. You strike a balance, knees bent, center low, every motion slow and measured, as if you're part of the lake. Historians still debate how widespread canoe-based gardening really was. Some argue it was a necessity. Many chinampas weren't reachable by footpaths at all. Others think it became a kind of stylistic choice, a signature move of the most practiced farmers. A flex, if you will. You glance over and see a woman on a neighboring plot adjusting reed trellises without leaving her boat. She loops a tomato vine around the support, and ties it in place with a cord of wet palm fiber, all from her seat in the stern. She catches you watching and smiles. "Elegant," she says. You nod. "I try." The tomatoes seem to respond. As if appreciating the care, they lean a little straighter, stretch a little higher. One blossom even opens fully, right in front of you. Like applause. Tiny yellow, floral applause. Your basket is nearly full now. The canoe dips a little lower in the water, swaying with the weight of fresh harvest. As you paddle back toward the main canal, you pass a boy guiding a canoe with his foot while carrying a duck under each arm. He whistles a song that sounds suspiciously like your compost chant. You tip your chin at him. He grins, then loses a sandal overboard. Standard. You pull into your dock, tie off the canoe, and lift the basket with both hands. The weight of it feels satisfying, earned. You set it on the edge of the chinampa and look back across the water. Everything moves slowly here. Even the wind. Even the tomatoes. You wipe your hands on your tunic and reach for your clay tally tablet. With a sharp reed, you scratch the marks, number of tomatoes, date, moon phase, and, just for your own amusement, a small doodle of a duck frowning at a tomato. Records matter. But sometimes, so does humor. You hang the tally in its usual place, under the sheltering fronds of the old willow that guards your main plot. The tree leans toward the canal like it's been listening this whole time. And maybe it has. Because out here, in this floating world of muck and math, every tomato has a story. And every gardener floats through it with muddy fingers and a quiet kind of pride. You're walking the chinampa again, basket emptied, hands free, heart full. The breeze has picked up just a little, enough to ripple the canal's glassy surface and send a few dragonflies zipping low like tiny, iridescent patrol boats. You're headed toward the companion beds, the quiet corners of the chinampa where your tomatoes share space with unexpected friends, marigolds, chilies, even a few stalks of maize that look like they're eavesdropping on everyone else's growth plans. Aztec gardening isn't just about tomatoes standing alone in rows. It's about companionship. The plants you grow together affect one another, like roommates with very specific habits. Some plants shade others. Some fix nitrogen in the soil. Some, like marigolds, just make pests rethink their life choices. You pause beside one such companion bed. Your tomatoes are cozy with chili peppers, their vines intertwining, their roots mingling in a way that would make a botany teacher blush. The chilies, slim and fierce, seem to challenge the tomatoes to grow bolder. The tomatoes, in return, mellow the vibe. Balance. You kneel beside them, running your hands over the leaves. The sun's higher now, and the plants are warmer, humming softly with the buzz of bees doing their rounds like tiny winged mail carriers. You remember a trick passed down through 3 generations of gardeners. Plant basil near the tomatoes, not just for flavor, but because basil helps ward off aphids. Of course, you tried it once. The basil grew, the aphids moved next door, and your neighbor hasn't spoken to you since. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs deliberately practiced companion planting or if it was just a happy accident observed over time. Whatever the truth, the system worked. You've seen it yourself. Tomatoes thrive in these little neighborhoods of flora, where each plant plays a role. You stand and walk a few paces to a plot where flowers bloom beside your vegetables, not out of vanity, but necessity. Bright orange Sempasicle marigolds stand guard at the corners of your chinampa. Their scent, sweet and peppery, floats in the air like a charm. Some say it keeps pests away. Others say it pleases the spirits. You say it makes the garden feel like it's smiling. Next to the marigolds, your amaranth flares upward in bold reds and golds, waving gently like flags in the wind. You've always liked planting them close to the tomatoes. Not for any proven agricultural reason, but because the colors look like they're having a party. A hummingbird zips past your ear and hovers near a blossom. You stay still. It glints like green metal, makes a sound like a tiny motorboat, then flits away without a thank you. Typical. You wander over to your test bed, a tiny patch where you've been experimenting with growing wild herbs between the tomato rows. Episode: Hoja Santa Chaya. Some do well. Others not so much. The chaya seems determined to die dramatically and take down a tomato vine with it. You make a note to replant that row and whisper an apology to the surviving tomato. Companion planting isn't just about yield, it's about the vibe. Some combinations just feel right. Like songs in harmony. Like friends that cook well together. You reach for your reed knife and clip a few marigold blossoms for drying. They'll go in the offering basket tonight, placed on the shrine at the edge of the canal, where flowers meet flame, and tomatoes meet the gods. Because even floating gardeners need a little divine backup. You set the blossoms in a shallow bowl of water and watch them bob gently. Bright bursts of orange against a still, green surface. It's the kind of beauty that doesn't ask for attention. It just is. You glance back at the rows of tomatoes, chilies, and companions, each plant growing not in isolation but in conversation. The wind stirs again. The water shimmers. And you walk slowly along the path of the chinampa, surrounded by 1,000 soft voices you can't quite hear, but somehow still understand. You're up early again, earlier than the frogs, earlier than even the old heron that usually claims the eastern dock like a grumpy fisherman. The mist clings low this morning, curling over the canals in soft swirls like lazy ghosts looking for breakfast. You tighten your cloak, step barefoot onto the damp chinampa, and feel that quiet, squishy give of living earth beneath your toes. Today is a seed day. Not the dramatic harvest kind, not the bustling festival kind, just the quiet, unglamorous, wonderfully meditative task of sorting, saving, and prepping tomato seeds. Because out here, tomatoes aren't just for today's meal, they're a promise to tomorrow's soil. You settle down cross-legged beside the small reed hut you use for storage. The roof is still beaded with dew. Inside, your drying racks are layered with yesterday's sliced tomatoes. Red, orange, green striped, their seeds glistening like tiny pearls embedded in fruity flesh. You smile. These are the good ones. The strong ones. The keepers. You ease one of the tomato slices into your palm and gently press out the seeds into a shallow clay dish. They come loose with a wet pop and a little squish. It's satisfying, like popping bubble wrap, if bubble wrap promised agricultural security. You do this one by one, tomato by tomato, discarding the slices once they've given their treasure. The ducks watch like you're making sushi. You're not. Don't give them any. The seeds need to ferment for a few days. Not because you're fancy, but because tomato seeds come with a natural coating that inhibits germination. And Aztec gardeners, bless them, figured out long before microscopes and seed catalogs that letting the seeds rot slightly makes them stronger. You set the dishes near the sun, under the watchful eye of a ceramic jaguar statue. It's chipped and one ear is missing, but it still looks intimidating enough to scare off inquisitive squirrels. Hopefully. Historians still argue whether Aztec seed-saving practices were centralized, controlled by temples, or family-based traditions. What's clear is that someone was keeping track of what worked, what failed, and what blossomed under certain moons. Your family's ledger is tucked inside the reed hut too, an old obsidian tablet etched with seasonal glyphs, seed counts, and that one year your cousin planted upside down and insisted it was an experimental method. He was wrong. You stretch, stand, and walk down to the shade rack, a woven frame raised on stakes above the soil where seeds dry after fermentation. You lift the cloth cover and check on the previous batch. Still sticky. A little smelly. Perfect. You run your fingers over the seeds, separating them with a gentle swirl of motion, the same way your grandmother used to swirl stories into her tea. Nearby, you've started organizing seeds by traits, firmness, color, drought tolerance. It's not just survival. It's custom gardening. You're curating the next generation like a museum exhibit. Tomatoes of future awesomeness. One bowl is labeled sweetest. Another, weird but promising. A third says, tried to bite me. That one's a joke. Mostly. You pass a few seeds through a sieve to clean them, watching as water dribbles down and the seeds cling to the edge like tiny, stubborn ships. You pat them dry on a cloth woven from lake reeds, dyed the color of sunrise. By noon, your hut smells like tangy tomato and damp linen. You hang the seed cloths from a line and let the breeze do the rest. While they dry, you take a slow lap around the chinampa, noting which plants are ready for seed saving next. Not the biggest, not the flashiest, but the healthiest. The tomatoes that survived a week of odd wind. The ones that didn't crack in last month's storm. The quiet overachievers. That's the thing about gardening here. You're not just feeding yourself. You're building legacy with mud and pulp. Every saved seed is a bet. A hope. A whisper to the future that says, let's try again. You finish the lap and return to your seed station just as a flock of birds swoops low over the canal, rising like breath into the sunlight. You smile, flick a stray seed from your tunic, and whisper to the air. Grow well. Be weird. Taste amazing. The wind seems to nod. And the seeds? They glisten in reply. You're stirring a pot now, slow circles with a paddle carved from driftwood, the kind of tool that knows its job without needing a pep talk. The scent rising is rich and earthy, a little tangy, and somehow, green. Not minty green. Tomato stem green. That strange, leafy aroma that clings to your fingers after pruning and makes you feel like you've touched something alive. Today's concoction isn't for eating. It's for spraying. This is your plant tonic, your grandmother's favorite recipe. Equal parts superstition and surprisingly effective horticulture. You've got crushed tomato leaves, a boiled reduction of neem bark, powdered chili flakes, and, of course, a pinch of ashes from last week's fire. Some say it keeps the pests away. Others say it's more of a psychological trick. If the plants smell extra planty, bugs get confused and leave. Either way, it works often enough to keep the tradition alive. You fill a clay flask, cork it, and set out to mister the tomato beds. The morning light hits the water just right, casting soft shadows across the leaves as you spray. The mist floats like a dream between the vines. Your tomatoes seem to sigh in appreciation. Or maybe that's just the way the leaves flutter when they're happy. You make your way to the far end of the chinampa, the oldest plot. The one with the vines that have been regrown and reseeded for more seasons than anyone remembers. You call them the ancestor row. Some vines there have personalities. One always leans left. One only flowers when it hears singing. One refuses to grow if it's not the third plant in the row. You don't question it. Here, the soil is deepest. The water around it is darkest. And the vines, when they bloom, produce tomatoes so dense, they make canoe paddling home a full-body workout. Historians still argue whether chinampa gardeners deliberately bred tomatoes for particular traits, or whether environmental selection did most of the work. Either way, you suspect both. Because these tomatoes? They remember. As you spray the tonic over the oldest vines, you notice a small insect nestled beneath a leaf. It looks like a beetle but smells like trouble. You gently flick it into a nearby patch of marigolds. Let them deal with it. You wipe sweat from your brow and check the leaves. No signs of yellowing, no curling, no mysterious bite marks. Just rows of thick, healthy greenery. A jungle of future salad. A hummingbird buzzes by your ear again. The same one from earlier. Or maybe a cousin. It hovers for a second, judges your outfit, and flits away. You move down the row, whispering little affirmations to each plant. Not because you think they understand words, but because you do. And sometimes gardening is less about technique and more about relationship. You talk to your tomatoes, and they answer in growth. You spot a vine that's drooping a little more than usual and dig around the base. The soil's too dry. Odd for this time of day. You make a mental note, reinforce that bed with more lake muck tomorrow. Next, you inspect the roots of a younger plant that's been struggling. Gently, like a doctor with a very leafy patient. The roots look pale but healthy. No rot, no signs of worm sabotage. You nod. Some plants just need time. Some people too. You finish misting and lean against the willow stake that marks the end of the bed. It's warm from the sun, cool underneath your fingers. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. To water lapping softly at the chinampa edges. To the creak of tomato vines shifting in the breeze. To the small, meaningful silence between bird calls. When you open your eyes, the light has shifted. You're dappled in gold and green, like you've stepped inside a painting that forgot it was supposed to stay still. The tonic flask is half empty now. You leave it on the stone ledge near the canal for tomorrow and begin your walk back. And as you walk, you catch yourself smiling. Not because today was extraordinary, but because it wasn't. It was just you. The soil. The tomatoes. And the kind of slow, sacred routine that grows things, not just plants, but patience, and peace, and maybe something a little like hope. You're standing now in the middle of what might be the strangest part of your chinampa, the section that isn't quite for planting and isn't quite for resting. It's your observation zone, or as your cousin once called it, the tomato lab. It's where your tomatoes go when they're weird. Not bad. Just odd. One vine here curls counterclockwise when everyone else goes right. Another bears fruit in pairs. Twin tomatoes joined at the hip like conjoined siblings from a vegetable opera. And over in the far corner is your current favorite, a tomato that's striped like a jaguar and has refused to turn red for 3 full moons. You squat next to that one, brushing your fingers across the firm, glossy fruit. It's still green with just the faintest shimmer of gold, like it's thinking about ripening but hasn't fully committed. A tomato with boundary issues. You hum to it softly. Tomatoes, you've come to learn, are full of surprises. And Aztec gardeners knew that better than anyone. Some varieties were intentionally grown for color, yellow, orange, even nearly purple. Some were shaped like plums, others like stars. Some had skins so thin they'd split if you looked at them wrong. Others were so tough they could survive a parade. Historians still debate the full extent of tomato domestication before European contact. Was it a slow, meandering affair? A few berries here and there gradually transformed through trade, preference, and climate? Or was it more methodical, an agricultural symphony led by generations of observant hands? Out here, the answer doesn't really matter. You just work with what grows. And what grows sometimes comes with personality. You walk to another plot, this one dedicated to low-growing tomato bushes. These stubborn things refuse to vine upwards no matter how many stakes you give them. But they spread like gossip, covering the chinampa like a living rug. You've learned to give them space and a stern talking to every few days. Next to them, your experimental grafting zone. A half-dozen vines tied together in very specific ways. 1 rootstock, 3 different fruiting stems. The goal? One plant that can give you early, mid, and late tomatoes like some sort of overachieving garden overlord. You don't expect miracles. But the vines are alive and thriving. 1 stem has flowers. 1 already holds a tiny tomato no larger than your thumbnail. And 1, well, that one hasn't done anything since last solstice. But you believe in late bloomers. A neighbor once asked why you bother with such things. Why not just grow the usual, the safe, the expected? And you said, because tomatoes didn't float here to be boring. You sit cross-legged between the plots, shaded by a mat of woven palm fronds stretched between poles. It's cooler here, and the smell is different, less ripe, more herbal. These tomatoes aren't about harvest, they're about curiosity. You pull out a scroll of bark paper and sketch today's findings. You record the twin fruits, the golden shimmer, the lazy graft. You add tiny doodles next to each entry because future you will appreciate the visual aids. A tomato with sunglasses. A tomato lifting weights. A tomato asleep under a leaf. Your notes will join generations of quiet observation. Passed on, modified, whispered through time not with lectures but with footprints in the mud and notches on canoe paddles. You lean back and sigh. The clouds are moving in slow herds overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a reed flute plays. Someone's lunch break is apparently very artistic today. You stretch your arms and yawn. You've learned more from these weird tomatoes than from any perfect row. They've taught you patience, creativity, the value of a well-timed eye roll. And most of all, they've reminded you, there is no one way to be a tomato. So why should there be just one way to be you? You're drifting now, slowly, gently, in your canoe along the edge of the chinampa, paddle barely disturbing the water. The midday heat has melted into a soft warmth, and the whole landscape looks like it's exhaling. This isn't a work paddle. It's a checking on your neighbor's paddle. And by neighbors, of course, you mean your fellow floating gardeners. A few plots over, old Tukli is pruning his squash like he's conducting a string quartet. Beyond him, Maxla has her hands buried elbow-deep in compost, and is singing to a row of beans that look absolutely flattered. You wave. She waves back with both hands, dirt and all. The floating gardens are more than just agriculture. They are communities stitched together by canoes, mud, and shared tomato theories. And honestly, quite a few tomato disagreements. Historians still argue whether chinampa systems were governed by central markets or local collectives. You've lived it, and the answer is somewhere in between. Everyone tends their own plot, but you all show up when it floods. Or freezes. Or when someone's vines go rogue and start climbing into a canoe. Looking at you, Tukli. You glide toward the community dock, a long stretch of planks where tools are shared and stories even more so. You tie up your canoe and step onto the platform, basket in hand, carrying a sample of your latest tomato harvest. A mix of colors and shapes, some round and proud, others squashed and confused. They're all beautiful. Today is a tomato exchange day. Not a formal one, there are no drums or speeches, but just a quiet ritual. Bring your best, trade for someone else's best, and gossip about aphids like old aunties at market. You offer your twin tomatoes and receive a yellow-striped variety from Maxla, who swears they taste like sunshine and sour tamarind. Tukli hands you a slightly wrinkled red tomato and says, "Don't judge it by the skin." You don't. It smells like fire and salt and something you can't quite name. There's talk today of an outlier chinampa, a floating garden 3 canals over where someone's tomatoes are ripening in only 40 days. "Impossible," says one voice. "They must be feeding it corned beer," says another. "Or secrets," adds a third. You make a mental note to paddle that way later. For science. You sit down on a low reed stool as a pot of tomato stew simmers nearby. A community lunch is brewing, literally. Chunks of maize, diced tomato, episode, maybe even a chili or two if someone's feeling brave. As the stew bubbles, someone brings out an old gourd filled with dried tomato seeds for trading. You sift through them like they're rare jewels, which honestly they kind of are. Some are smooth and golden. Others are dark, crinkled, and suspiciously shaped like commas. You swap a few of yours, your experimental stripy ones, for a pouch labeled Tukli's Dream. You ask what they are. He shrugs. They dream. You'll see. You tuck them away like a secret. After lunch, someone retells the story of the tomato vine that climbed all the way onto a priest's canoe and tangled around the paddle until the poor man had to row home with his elbows. You've heard it 100 times, and it still makes you laugh. You glance around at the faces, sun-weathered, mud-streaked, tomato-obsessed, and feel that deep, humming sense of belonging. This floating world, built from Lake muck and ambition, is held together not just by canals and roots, but by shared sunrises and tomato trades. You paddle back home slowly, your basket a little heavier, your chinampa a little closer. The water reflects the sky now, blue and lazy, with clouds like spilled milk. And in your heart, a soft certainty, tomatoes float best when they're not alone. You're back on your chinampa by dusk, and everything has taken on that golden, syrupy glow that makes tomatoes look like they've been painted by a particularly sentimental god. The light glances off the canal, bouncing up through the leaves and making your vines shimmer like they've been dusted with sun. You drop your basket on the woven mat and crouch next to the newcomers, the seeds you traded for. Tukli's Dream sits in a small pouch, the kind made from beaten bark and sealed with a twist of agave fiber. It crinkles softly in your palm, like a secret unwrapping itself. You pour the seeds into your hand. They're darker than yours. Smaller. A bit more wrinkled, too, like they've already lived a few lives and came back to try again. You plant 3 of them. Not more. Just enough to test the dream. As you work, you listen to the frogs. They've started their night song, an odd chorus of hiccups and whistles and that one frog who always sounds like a broken reed flute. You smile. He's trying his best. You grab your tomato-watching stool, a low, slightly lopsided thing woven from water reeds, and position yourself by the edge of the plot. It's time for observation hour, which is exactly what it sounds like. You sit, and you stare at your tomatoes until they tell you something new. This one? It's developing a lean. That one? Its blossoms are curling slightly, maybe too much sun. Over there? A fresh flush of flowers that weren't there yesterday. Tomatoes grow slowly, but they change quickly. You've learned to see the in-betweens. You remember your grandmother once told you, a good gardener watches more than she waters. You took that to heart, maybe too literally. Sometimes you sit out here so long the ducks start checking if you've rooted. Historians still argue whether the tomato was truly revered in pre-Columbian rituals, or merely eaten with reverence. But out here, watching your vines catch the last light of day, you don't really care. Because this feels sacred. You pluck a ripe tomato and hold it in your palm. Still warm from the sun, its skin taut and vibrant, like it knows it's at peak performance. You press it gently, then twist the stem free with a soft snap. And because you've earned it, you take a bite. The taste is everything, acid and sweet, soft and tangy, and so deeply red that your mouth feels like it's been painted with sunlight and rainwater. You close your eyes and let the flavor settle. Somewhere nearby, a heron cries out, sharp and annoyed, probably at a frog that sang off-key. The wind moves through the willows like a lullaby. You take another bite, slower this time. Then set the rest aside. This one will be saved for seed. It deserves to continue. You reach into your toolkit for a small obsidian blade, the kind used not for violence but for gentle, precise slicing. You have the tomato and carefully scoop out the gel-filled seed pockets into a clay bowl. The pulp glistens in the twilight like garnet jelly. These are keeper seeds. You can feel it. You clean the knife on your tunic, then return to your stool, bowl in hand, as the sun finally dips below the edge of the world. The last rays catch the surface of the canal and everything turns gold, your hands, the vines, even the frogs for a moment. A kingdom of quiet, floating fire. And just before darkness settles in full, you whisper to the seeds. Sleep well. Grow strange. Remember the dream. They don't answer. But you swear the leaves rustle, just a little. You wake to birds arguing. Not singing, arguing. The kind of noisy, self-important chirping that says, "This is my willow branch, Gerald, and I don't care if you nested here last week." The sun's only just pulled itself up over the horizon, and the mist still clings to the canals like a blanket someone forgot to fold. You stretch, blinking at the haze, and shuffle barefoot to the edge of the chinampa. The earth is cool and soft beneath your toes, a little damp from the night dew. Your tomato vines are still asleep, or at least pretending to be. Their leaves are curled inward, holding the last of the night's moisture like little green secrets. This morning's task? Muck management. You grab your reed rake, a glorified pitchfork with character, and paddle out to the nearest canal edge, where the lake's muck is thickest. It's not glamorous. It smells a bit like fish who've made poor life decisions. But it's the foundation of your floating garden. The Aztecs weren't just farmers. They were engineers in mud. You dip the rake into the shallows, dragging it through the viscous silt, pulling up a gloppy mix of algae, lake-bottom debris, and bits of half-decomposed aquatic plants. It slops into your canoe with the consistency of pudding that's seen things. This muck is gold. Not literal gold, though you did once find a shiny fish scale that made you briefly overreact, but gold for your tomatoes. It's mineral-rich, full of nitrogen, and perfectly squishy. It's what keeps your chinampa from floating away in every sense of the word. Historians still argue whether the muck was dredged daily, weekly, or seasonally. You suspect the real answer is, whenever the tomatoes start giving you side-eye. You return to the chinampa and begin spreading the muck across the weaker rows, the ones where the soil's starting to compact or dry too quickly. With every layer, you pat it down gently, like frosting a very strange, very living cake. There's an art to muck spreading. Too thin, and it dries out before it can settle. Too thick, and you suffocate the roots. You aim for that perfect, mysterious middle, what your grandfather called a tortilla's worth of mud. As you work, you sing softly. Not a song with words, just a tune. Low and repetitive, like water rocking against wood. The same melody you heard your aunt hum when she stitched tomato sacks by firelight. It helps the muck settle. Or maybe just helps your brain settle. You pause to watch a water bug skitter across the canal. It's carrying a bit of leaf like a victory flag. A tiny triumph in the floating kingdom. Then, from across the water, you hear a splash. Not a bird. Bigger. You stand squinting through the reeds, and there it is, a capybara. It stares at you. You stare back. This is new. It blinks. You blink. It lowers itself into the water with the elegance of a soggy melon and floats away, unconcerned. You whisper, "Good luck with the tomatoes. Just in case." The muck is nearly spread now, and your garden smells rich, earthy, alive. You can already feel the soil changing beneath your feet, cooler, softer, with that spongy resilience that tomatoes love. It's like giving them a hug they didn't know they needed. You sit back on your heels and wipe your hands on your thighs. Your tunic, once clean, now resembles abstract art inspired by wet compost. You don't mind. It's the uniform of a chinampa steward, after all. The sun's higher now, lighting up every droplet still clinging to the leaves. And from where you sit, your tomato vines don't just look healthy. They look grateful. The morning has fully stretched itself awake now, and so have your tomatoes. You swear you can hear them rustling with anticipation, leaves unfurling like lazy cats, blossoms lifting their yellow heads toward the sun. It's a good day. The kind of day where everything feels settled. Even the frogs seem less dramatic. You rise from your muck street seat, brush off the worst of the grime, and head toward the shade plot, a small corner of your chinampa tucked beneath a network of woven palm fronds and slender willows. This is where you grow your delicate varieties. The ones that sulk in too much light. Tomatoes with opinions. Here, the air is cooler, dappled with shadow, and the soil is moist but never soggy. You crouch beside a vine that curls like a dancer and gently lift one of its fruits. It's pale, almost translucent, with the blush of pink just beginning to bloom near the base. It's not ready yet but close. You whisper to it, because why not? Encouragement is free. This section of the chinampa is experimental. You've planted foreign varieties here, seeds traded with travelers from the coast, or gifted by curious visitors from the highlands. Historians still argue how far tomato varieties had spread before contact with Europe. Some suggest the reach was modest. Others believe the little fruit was already on the brink of culinary stardom across Mesoamerica. You think of the man who paddled through last harvest, clutching a pouch of tiny yellow seeds and mumbling about tomatoes that tasted like citrus and honey. You planted them here. One of them grew. It's the sulker near the edge, but you forgive it. The vines in the shade plot grow differently. Slower. More introspective. Their leaves are broader, reaching sideways instead of up. They don't sprawl, they nestle. These tomatoes aren't trying to impress. They're just trying to understand themselves. As you inspect the vines, you spot something odd, a tomato fruit shaped like a heart. Not vaguely. Not suggestively. No, this tomato has leaned all the way in. It's got the cleft at the top and everything. You cradle it in your palm, half in awe, half in disbelief. You imagine the debates it would spark at the community dock. Is it a sign? Of what? Obviously romance. Or fungus. You smile and gently return it to the vine. Let it ripen in peace. No pressure, little fruit. You step back and take in the plot. Every chinampa gardener has a spot like this, a quiet corner where curiosity is allowed to run wild. Some use it to test soil blends. Others, to see if tomatoes will grow better near frogs. Spoiler, no definitive results yet, but the frogs are thriving. It's in this kind of space that the real work happens, not just the planting and watering and muck hauling, but the observing. The wondering. The what if? Like, what if tomatoes could grow upside down? What if music made them ripen faster? What if one variety could survive a frost with just a woven cloak? Okay, that last one is more fantasy than botany. But still. The shade plot is where rules are politely ignored and imagination becomes part of the harvest. You pick a few leaves that are starting to curl. Check the base of the stems for bugs, none today, blessedly. You sing a little nonsense tune as you water, something about floating gardens and tomato dreams and the fact that you once stepped on a frog barefoot and everyone still talks about it. And then, just as you're about to leave the plot, a breeze moves through. It lifts the palm fronds above, stirs the air, and sets the vines to swaying ever so slightly. The leaves ripple. The blossoms nod. And for a moment, the entire shade plot feels like it's breathing with you. You leave the shade plot with a little more pep in your step, and a faint tomato leaf stuck in your hair. It's fine. You're basically foliage at this point anyway. The midday sun is climbing now, casting shorter shadows and warming the surface of the canals until they glint like long strips of obsidian glass. You paddle slowly toward the far end of your chinampa, where your irrigation system waits to be inspected. It's not glamorous, but it's what keeps the whole operation afloat, literally. Now you're probably picturing pipes or valves or fancy aqueducts, but your setup is a touch more homemade. Think woven reed funnels, hollowed gourds, and a cunning slope system involving nothing more high-tech than gravity and determination. The Aztecs were master hydraulic engineers, remember? Their entire city of Tenochtitlan floated on managed water, controlled flood zones, causeways, and aqueducts bringing in fresh water from springs miles away. Historians still argue whether the engineering blueprints were passed down orally or whether symbols carved into stones served as guides. Either way, your little system here owes everything to that watery genius. You check the flow channels, narrow trenches that run between the garden beds. The water should flow evenly, slowly, like a lazy dancer weaving her way through rows of sun-baked soil. But today, there's a backup. You crouch, squint at the narrow trench, and find the culprit, a stubborn clump of duckweed, glued together with something suspiciously gelatinous. Probably courtesy of that one toad you saw yesterday. You grab a reed stick and poke it loose. A satisfying glurp follows. Success. You guide the water gently, letting it trickle back into the channels. You can almost hear the roots sigh in relief. Hydration achieved. As you adjust the tilting gourd spout, you notice something curious, a trail of tiny prints in the damp soil. Not human. Not duck. You lean closer. Capybara again? No, too small. Possum? Possibly. You decide it's unknown tomato guardian, and move on. Back at the edge of the irrigation trench, you set down a gourd filled with tomato leaf tea, a concoction made by steeping wilted leaves in warm water for days. It smells like ambition and salad dressing. You use it sparingly to deter pests. Some gardeners swear it works. Others say the bugs just develop taste. Still, you pour a bit near your most fragile plants, just in case. They deserve every bit of oddball protection you can offer. And here's a funny thing. One of your vines has wrapped itself around the reed water spout. Not in a desperate, strangled way, more like a hug. You leave it. Let it have its moment. Plants get lonely too, you're convinced. After smoothing the irrigation trench and adjusting a few reed braces, you sit back and wipe your forehead. The sun has baked the air into something just shy of soup, and the smell of warm tomato leaves drifts up from the vines like a garden's version of incense. A canoe floats by slowly in the distance. A neighbor nods. You nod back. No words exchanged. Just mutual tomato respect. You reach into your satchel and pull out a small corn cake wrapped in leaves. It's lunch now, portable, practical, and a little dry, but you dunk it in canal-chilled water and pretend it's gourmet. As you chew, you stare at the vines along your canal's edge. Their reflection in the water dances with the ripples, like they're waving at themselves. And you think about how none of this would work without the water, flowing through the canals, cradling your garden, feeding the muck, cooling your bare feet. You didn't build a farm. You built a floating orchestra, and the irrigation is your quiet percussion section. You hum again, soft and low, as the vines lean gently in rhythm. Hey guys! If you enjoyed today's topic, drop a 1 in the comments. If it wasn't quite your thing, hit us with a 2, we're always looking to get better. The afternoon air settles in like a warm blanket, just a little too thick, like soup someone forgot to season. Even the birds have quieted down, retreating to the shadiest corners of the willows. You squint up at the sky, then glance down at your sun-baked arms. Time for some shade maintenance. The problem with floating gardens is that the sun doesn't care about your delicate complexion or your tomatoes' mood swings. Without a proper canopy, your vines can burn, wilt, or, worst of all, get dramatic. And so you reach for your woven reed awnings, tied to thin poles you shift like sails throughout the day. Today's task? Repositioning. You move carefully, ducking between the rows and untying the knotted cords that hold the awnings in place. They flap gently above your head, their frayed edges fluttering like gossiping flags. The vines underneath them already look a bit perkier. It's tomato psychology, really. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs used permanent structures or movable shading systems for their crops. You suspect it was both, depending on the plant, the season, and how rebellious the gardener felt. You, personally, are going full artisan mode today. As you retie the awnings, you spot something strange, a vine that's grown in a full spiral, looping back on itself like it's trying to win a horticultural gymnastics medal. It's not harming anything, just expressing itself. You crouch down and whisper, "You do you." It seems satisfied. While you're down there, you check for sun stress, leaves curling, discoloration, that telltale dry crunch that says, "Oops, too late." But your vines seem content, drowsy even, like cats napping in dappled light. You decide to water the outer rows again. Just a light splash from your gourd ladle, tracing a winding path between the stalks. The droplets land like soft applause on the leaves, and the scent they release is something only tomato growers know, a mix of green spice, earth, and a whisper of sourness, like the air after it rains on a forest. You take a seat under one of the awnings, letting the filtered sunlight dance across your face. The wind shifts again, gentle, salty from the lake. It brings with it the distant echo of drums, maybe from the market docks. Someone's celebrating. Or harvesting. Or just rhythmically annoyed. You close your eyes for a moment, and let the sound wrap around you. When you open them again, you're not alone. There's a turtle. Not a metaphorical turtle, a real one, with moss on its back and an expression like it's judging your shading technique. It moves slowly between the vines, then plops into a patch of shade and goes still. A fellow shade enthusiast. You nod. The turtle does not nod back. The light begins to soften again, slipping down toward evening tones. You take one last walk through the plot, checking every awning, adjusting poles, and whispering a few last compliments to your more photogenic tomatoes. One of them has split slightly from the heat, a thin seam along its side. Not ideal, but not tragic. You cradle it, remove it gently, and set it on the compost bowl. Even imperfect tomatoes deserve a second act. By the time the sun kisses the canal, your whole chinampa glows with that particular kind of peace that only comes when you know the worst of the heat has passed, and your tomatoes, fickle, finicky, beloved, are safe under their sails. You sit again. The turtle is still there. A quiet, satisfied exhale leaves you both. The golden hour arrives not with a bang, but a warm sigh. Light drapes across the chinampa like a shawl, brushing the tops of your tomato plants, and catching on the dew that's already beginning to reform at the edges of the leaves. You know this light, the tomato glow light. It makes everything look riper, friendlier, like it belongs in a soft focus painting. This is when you begin the harvest walk. You take your basket, woven reed, soft from use, and begin at the farthest end of the plot. The air hums with mosquitoes in the distance, but for now, they leave you alone. Maybe even they respect the ritual. The first tomato you pick is small and round, red with a splash of orange, like it's trying to make up its mind. You give it a gentle twist, and it comes loose with the tiniest sigh. Okay, fine, maybe you imagine that. Still, it feels like permission. Tomatoes weren't always red. Some of the oldest Mesoamerican varieties were yellow, golden, even purple. Historians still argue whether red became dominant due to taste, ritual color symbolism, or sheer tomato drama. Your personal theory? Red is just harder to ignore. You move slowly through the rows, stopping to admire, inspect, and occasionally compliment. "You're doing amazing, sweetie," you whisper to a particularly symmetrical vine. It responds by doing nothing, as expected. But the harvest is good today. Not overwhelming, not sparse. Just enough. Enough to fill your basket without strain. Enough to make you consider which neighbor will get which bundle. Enough to save seeds from the best specimens and tuck them into your pouch for next season. You reach the shaded row and hesitate. That heart-shaped tomato is still there, blushing a little deeper now. You pick it gently, cradling it like a baby bird. This one? This one goes on the altar. Yes, your tomato altar. Everyone's got one, whether they admit it or not. Yours is a flat stone slab near your water jug, decorated with a carved spiral and one inexplicably lucky feather. You place the heart tomato in the center, surrounded by 3 smaller fruits like awkward cousins at a wedding. You light a bit of copal resin, a leftover from the temple market, and let the smoke curl over the tomatoes like a blessing. It smells sweet and slightly like pine. Old world incense for new world fruit. And here's the thing about tomato harvesting. It isn't just picking fruit. It's remembering which vine sulked last year, which patch floods when you step too hard, which leaf pattern means, "Hey, I'm cold." It's memory. It's matchmaking. It's a dance with dirt. Your basket is full now, and heavier than you expected. You carry it to your canoe, which rocks slightly in greeting. The water is glassy again, catching the last fire of the sky. Every tomato you harvested tonight has a bit of that sky in its skin. You sit beside the canoe and let your feet dangle in the water, the ripples kissing your ankles. Nearby, the turtle shifts in its mossy nap spot. A duck glides by like it's got places to be. A dragonfly does an unnecessarily flashy flip. And for a moment, everything is soft. Tomatoes. Water. Light. Even your breath. Tomorrow, you'll pickle some. Slice others. Trade a few. Roast one just to see what happens. But tonight they're just here. Just gathered. And so are you. The sun dips lower now, brushing its final gold across the canal like a sleepy painter packing up for the night. The shadows stretch long and blue across your chinampa, and your basket of tomatoes is tucked securely in the canoe. But you're not heading home just yet. No, tonight is market night. You paddle slowly, the water whispering around your oar. The city is a glowing silhouette ahead of you, Tenochtitlan, the floating metropolis of stone and shimmering canals. You're not going all the way into the big markets of the city center. No need for that bustle. You're headed to a floating market, a seasonal gathering of gardeners and foragers and one very persistent gourd seller who always tries to upsell his squashes. You round a bend and there it is, a cluster of chinampas lashed gently together by vines and poles, market boats moored side by side like a floating village made of produce. A few torchlights flicker to life, their reflections bobbing in the water like sleepy fireflies. The air smells of crushed herbs, wood smoke, and a faint note of fried maize dough. Someone's already made tamales. That's ambitious. You secure your canoe and step onto one of the rafts. It creaks softly, but holds. Around you, neighbors are arranging their harvests on reed mats, piles of red and yellow tomatoes, baskets of chilies that could challenge your dignity, bundles of herbs tied with lake grass. A man 3 plots over is dramatically fanning bees away from his honey pots, muttering about winged extortionists. You find your usual spot, a flat raft shaded by an arch of willow branches. You unpack your basket, placing the tomatoes carefully into groups, big ones to the left, small and odd-shaped ones in the middle, and your prized tomato, the heart one, at the very center, surrounded by flower petals. It's not for sale. It's just ambience. Here's how floating market trade works: no shouting. No haggling like city merchants. You chant your offering in rhythm, low, repetitive, almost like a lullaby. Red fruit for root. Red fruit for root. Soon enough, someone glides up in a canoe and offers a bundle of sweet potatoes and cured lake fish in exchange. You nod. The trade is made. Another neighbor swaps you a string of dried chili peppers for your streaked golden tomato. Someone else offers you a carved jade bead for 2 of your sleepy-eyed tomatoes, an affectionate name for the kind with half-split skins and drooping stems. You consider it. Accept. Nearby, a young boy is singing a trade song to sell his mother's soaproot bundles. His voice wavers like the torchlight, high and soft. Bubbles for your belly, bubbles for your boots. The market hums with quiet warmth. People laugh gently, greet each other with nods and back pats. A grandmother with 5 braids and exactly 1 tooth tells the same joke she tells every week about how she once tricked an emperor into buying a rotten tomato, and how that tomato went on to start a minor spiritual movement. You laugh again, even though you know every word. Historians still argue how structured these floating markets were. Some believe they were casual affairs, while others suggest detailed protocols, trade hierarchies, and licensing tokens. You lean toward the structured chaos theory, order with just enough wiggle room for gossip and storytelling. As the night deepens, the trade's slow. People sip corned beer, munch tamales, and gather on the biggest raft to share news. Someone strums a simple melody on a turtle shell lute. Someone else tells the story of a floating garden that once drifted all the way to the sea and came back with a seagull and a coconut. You know it's time to head home when your basket is half filled with other people's harvests, and your tomatoes have scattered into happy bellies and future gardens. You pack up slowly, thanking your neighbors with murmurs and a nod to the moon, which is now rising like a pale coin over the city. You paddle home with the faint sound of flute music trailing behind you, and the taste of a shared tamale still warm on your tongue. Your tomatoes are gone, but your chinampa is ready to grow more. By the time you return to your chinampa, the moon has taken over the sky in earnest, glowing like a smug lantern just out of reach. The stars follow it lazily, stretching across the lake's reflection in a glimmering web. Your paddle moves silently now, practiced and unhurried. You dock your canoe and step back onto your garden raft, which seems to sway a little more tenderly under moonlight. The turtles are gone. The ducks are snoring. Yes, ducks snore. You've heard it. Like tiny, congested ocarinas? Your feet land in soft mud and reed matting, familiar and forgiving. You move toward the center of your chinampa with one goal in mind, a night check. You light a small clay lamp, an oil wick tucked inside a pot shaped like a jaguar head. Its glow is faint and golden, just enough to illuminate the outlines of your vines. You walk slowly now, not just because it's dark, but because the night has its own rhythm. You don't want to wake the leaves. Your tomatoes shimmer slightly under the moon. You didn't know that was a thing? Oh yes. The tiny fuzz on their stems and fruit catches light like it's holding secrets. You stop and run a finger along one vine. It's cool to the touch and slightly damp with dew. Nighttime on a chinampa is when the ecosystem shifts. What was once a chirping, buzzing, sweaty garden becomes a whispering, sighing cathedral of green. Moths hover like soft punctuation. Frogs tune their throats like reluctant opera singers. The reeds murmur. And you, barefoot and well-lit, are the high priest of this very sleepy order. You check for damage, nibbled leaves, snapped stems, cheeky footprints. You find a half-eaten tomato tucked beneath a leaf. Judging by the size of the bite, the possum is back. Or perhaps a very ambitious frog. You leave it alone. Everyone's got to eat. You pause near the altar. The heart-shaped tomato remains untouched. Maybe the gods do have taste. Or maybe the possum prefers symmetry. You sit for a while in front of the altar, crossing your legs and settling your lamp beside you. The smell of the resin lingers faintly. Not quite smoke, not quite sap, just the ghost of both. As your eyes adjust to the shadows, you notice something curious. One tomato plant has turned slightly, its stem leaning in a direction it wasn't this morning. You whisper, "Did you move?" It does not reply. But you make a note to watch it tomorrow. Maybe it's following the moon. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs conducted garden checks at night. Some suggest religious significance, moon rituals, flower offerings, silent songs. Others believe it was just about pest control. You suspect both. Practicality and reverence make excellent roommates. You finish your rounds, noting a few damp spots that might need better drainage, a leaf curl that could signal aphids, and a suspiciously relaxed squirrel curled up in your reed basket. You let it stay. Before heading to bed, you retrieve a small clay cup and dip it into your water jug. It's cool, with a hint of tomato leaf from the nearby vines. You sip it slowly, feeling it trickle down your throat like sleep itself. You blow out the lamp and sit for one more minute in the darkness, surrounded by the sounds of your floating kingdom. A plop. A distant flute. The hush of green things growing. The night is not silent. It just speaks a softer language. You wake slowly, with a crick in your neck and a speck of tomato leaf stuck to your cheek. The sun is barely a whisper on the horizon, and everything is wrapped in that early morning hush that feels almost sacred. The air is cooler now, laced with fog rising off the water in gentle ribbons. You stretch beneath your reed canopy and rub your eyes. Your knees complain slightly. Sleeping on a chinampa might be poetic, but it's not orthopedic. Still, there's no better time for the morning sweep. You grab your paddle broom, fashioned from bundled reeds and bound with lake twine, and begin to gently sweep across the pathways of your floating garden. Not for dirt, no, there's always dirt. You're sweeping dew from the walkways, brushing stray leaves, and evicting one very sleepy frog who seems mildly offended by your broom. Morning sweeping is less about cleaning and more about recentering. Like tidying your thoughts before the day gets loud again. As you move through the rows, you notice the first blush of ripeness on a new tomato vine, pale gold with streaks of green, like it hasn't quite decided if it wants to commit. You give it a little nod and say, "Take your time. We're not in a rush." This vine, if you recall correctly, was grown from a seed you got in a market trade. Historians still debate how tomato varieties were tracked and preserved in Aztec agriculture. Some say there were communal seed banks, others argue for family-kept lineages, passed down like heirlooms. You like the idea of both. Communal knowledge, personal pride. You water lightly, careful not to shock the roots. The soil is still damp from the night air, but you offer a splash for morale. And yes, you talk to your plants. They don't talk back, but they've got good listening posture. From the north edge of your chinampa, you spot a canoe in the distance. Not fast-moving. Probably an old man in a wide-brimmed hat, your neighbor who sells marigolds and insists they keep away mosquitoes and heartbreak. He waves. You wave back. You've got a few marigolds tucked along the edge of your tomato rows. Their scent is sharp and stubborn, like a spice that's slightly annoyed to be awake. They bloom with a kind of flashy stubbornness, as if daring pests to approach. A dragonfly zips past your face, wings catching the light like shattered glass. It hovers, then lands on a vine. Instant poetry. Breakfast, when you remember it, is usually simple. Today it's a tortilla warmed over a clay griddle, wrapped around a handful of roasted lake greens and a single tomato you accidentally bruised yesterday. The skin is split, but the taste is perfect, sweet, tangy, earthy. You chew slowly, watching the ripples across the water and listening for ducks. As you eat, you spot something unusual. A floating vine, not attached to your garden. Just drifting. It's young, with fresh shoots and a couple of stubborn roots still holding onto a tangle of lake grass. You scoop it gently from the water and inspect it. It's healthy. You smile. Looks like someone upstream had a rebellious tomato start. And now you've got a new guest. You tuck it into a pocket of soft soil near the edge of your plot. If it takes root, it'll be a story. If not, it was still a moment. This is how a chinampa lives, not just in what you grow, but in what the lake gives back. A seedling here. A turtle nap there. The moon in the water. The neighbor's laughter floating down the current. And your tomatoes, stubborn, sweet, ever-evolving, blushing. In the morning sun. By mid-morning, the sun is fully awake and rather smug about it. The water glints like someone spilled sequins across the canal, and even the frogs seem too warm to hop with enthusiasm. You shade your eyes with one hand, the other gripping a shallow reed basket that's half filled with tools and one stubborn gourd who refuses to leave your sight. Today is repair day, not the most glamorous title, but the backbone of a chinampa's quiet immortality. You begin at the southeast edge, where the current has been nibbling the soil more than you'd like. With a practiced hand, you drive down bundles of reeds and sticks, lashing them together with lake twine and forming a miniature barricade. Aztecs used these methods to reinforce the bones of their floating plots, essentially knitting the island together over and over again like a sock that refuses to die. Historians still argue whether the frequency of these maintenance rituals was daily, weekly, or seasonal. The truth is, it depends. You patch what shifts. You rebuild what sighs. You mend before it unravels. As you kneel in the shallows, Adjusting the base of the chinampa, you discover an old ceramic shard nestled in the mud. Faded red slip, perhaps part of a bull, or a figurine. You thumb the edge and set it on a flat rock near the altar. You have a little collection now, each shard like a whisper from someone else's floating garden. And then comes divine weaving. Some of your tomato plants have decided they no longer care for your sense of order. They sprawl, like overcaffeinated snakes, reaching for space that isn't theirs. You gently coax them back, tying the most rebellious ones to a willow frame using soft fiber string. It's part gardening, part diplomacy. The vine in the northwest corner, the one you found floating yesterday, has perked up considerably. A tiny green shoot points upward now, like a raised hand. You grin? Glad you're settling in. A few dragonflies orbit you, like lazy satellites. One lands on your shoulder and stares at you with mild disapproval. You nod solemnly. Yes, I see it too. That patch of moss needs trimming. And so it does. You scoop and tidy, smooth and pat, letting your fingers sink into the warm mud, cool water, and root-woven spaces in between. This is more than repair. It's reknitting the floating skin of the world beneath your tomatoes. You pause to stretch your back, eyes drifting across the lake. In the far distance, someone's playing a hollow flute. The notes wobble a little but rise sweetly over the reeds. Nearby, a group of children paddle past in a small canoe, one of them waving a tomato like a victory flag. You wave back. They giggle and vanish behind a bend. Lunch is a simple affair, a tomato sliced with salt and lime, laid across a piece of maize cake. You eat while sitting on your newly patched section of chinampa, legs dangling in the water, watching the sun climb higher. For dessert? One of your oddball tomatoes, the lumpy one with a spot that looks like a bird footprint. It tastes unexpectedly floral, like a tomato with secrets. You finish your meal and lie back on the reed mat, staring up through the willow branches above. They sway gently. The vines rustle. The chinampa hums a slow, silent tune. And you, caretaker of drifting gardens, herder of tomatoes, whisper of roots, drift with it. The afternoon stretches out like a lazy cat, warm and unhurried. The lake is quieter now, the wind slipping through the reeds in soft, thoughtful phrases. You sit cross-legged beneath the shade of your willow frame, a shallow bowl of fresh tomato slices at your side. The sun dapples across your shoulders as if patting you on the back for a job well done. It's time to reflect. Not in a dramatic, memoir-writing kind of way, more like the way the water reflects the sky, softly, with a few wobbles, and absolutely no urgency. You stare out across your chinampa, noting how far it's come. From scattered seed to fully tangled jungle of joy. A place where tomatoes drift, and vines gossip in the breeze. You remember your first attempt, a garden plot so unbalanced it nearly did a backflip. The tomatoes were enthusiastic but confused, and the ducks kept stealing your compost. Now your chinampa hums with balance, rhythm, and cheeky frogs. Not perfection. Just harmony. Your hands run along the stalks of one plant, fingers tracing the fuzzy stems and gentle curve of ripening fruit. Some of the tomatoes are the classics, plump and predictable. Others are wildcards, striped, stubby, or shaped like something a bored god doodled on a slow day. You cherish them all. You think of the people who came before you. The Aztec gardeners, builders of floating ecosystems, stewards of soil and sun. They didn't have spreadsheets or grow lights, just mud, patience, and a fierce understanding of how to listen to the earth. Historians still debate how these early gardeners saw their role. Were they priests, farmers, engineers, or something in between? You like to imagine they were dreamers with dirt under their fingernails. Much like you. A soft splash behind you. You turn slowly and spot it, a heron, tall and contemplative, standing on the far edge of your plot. It watches you with one eye, then glides its beak into the water and pulls up a fish with alarming elegance. You raise a hand in greeting. It doesn't wave back, but you sense mutual respect. The wind picks up slightly, and your tomato vines rustle in response, almost like a sigh or a sleepy yawn. The willow leaves dance above you, filtering the golden light into puddles of warmth on your legs. You stretch out along the soft mat, stomach full of sun-warmed fruit and tamale memories. The scent of soil, lake, and marigold floats around you like an old lullaby. And then you close your eyes. You breathe in. You breathe out. The chinampa rocks ever so gently beneath you, cradling your thoughts, your roots, your laughter. Time slows. Even the birds seem to pause. The wind, the water, the vines, they all settle into stillness. And so do you. The light is low now. Not gone, just quieter, its edges softened by the coming dusk. Shadows stretch long across the chinampa, wrapping your floating garden in a sleepy kind of gold. Your breath slows with the rhythm of the lake. Inhale through your nose. You catch hints of damp earth, crushed tomato leaf, and the faintest whisper of marigold. Exhale through your mouth. Let the day go. The tomato vines around you sway, not with urgency, but with something older. Something steadier. They'd been here long before you. They'll be here long after. And right now, they are simply swaying with you. You hear the soft chirp of a bird you cannot name. The gentle splash of something slipping beneath the surface. The creak of reeds leaning into each other like old friends. Far off, someone's playing a flute. The notes are meandering, imperfect, and that makes them perfect. Like a song written for no one, meant only to drift. You shift slightly on your mat, the woven reeds pressing familiar patterns into your skin. A cool breeze kisses your cheek and brushes your hair. You let it. There is no to-do list here. No expectations. No rush. The chinampa floats. The tomatoes ripen. You exist. And that's enough. You remember the floating vine, the little surprise guest. It's still growing at the edge, roots tangled with your own. A quiet reminder that not everything must be planted with intention. Some things arrive by chance, and stay because they're meant to. A frog croaks once. Then again. Then seems to forget why it started. The moon is rising now, soft, round, watchful. It casts a silver path across the water, like a dream waiting to be walked. You close your eyes. The world narrows to the warmth of your breath, the softness of soil, the hush of water against wood. There are no grand goodbyes. Just the steady rhythm of a life gently tended. The chinampa sways. The tomatoes sleep. And so do you. Hey guys. My name is Stefan. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means a lot and I look forward to bringing you new topics soon. Stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you